Welcome to the Across the Bar podcast, where we talk about why today's headlines are important for your success at work. I'm Peter Rahbar, and I'm your first legal call.
And I'm Laura Brounstein, your first comms call. Hi, Peter.
Laura, big day for you today, and all the listeners and viewers
Not
should
every
know.
day you turn 33.
Yeah. All right. I thought it was 25.
No, 33. It's a big year.
Yeah. And it's a special day. It's your first podcast birthday, so I got you a little
Oh my God, how
birthday
cute of
cupcake. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a nice guy. See
you!
that?
You're a
I love
very nice guy.
birthdays.
Wait, hold it up one more second. Oh my God, it's so cute. I took a picture. Okay.
Yeah. So
You're cute.
happy birthday. Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. Welcome to the Across the Bar podcast, as Peter said. And before we get into all of our topics, I just want to hit that Peter was one of the first people that said to me, employee pushback is going to continue to matter more and more, and that is going to lead to a rise in activism overall. And I think Jimmy Kimmel coming back on air so quickly because of public pushback is such a good example of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we both agreed that he was going to come back on air, even at the
And we
Sinclair
both
and
said Sinclair
Nexstar.
and Newsmax
Nexstar.
would take him back.
Yeah, Nexstar would take him back, and
Next,
they quickly folded, and they did. And look, there is a narrative out there that companies have all the power, and that these institutions affiliated with the administration have all the power. And I think you need to take a step back and remember there's a lot of people in this country, and there's a lot of people in this country who still believe in the power of their voice and the power of their pocketbooks, and they can make a real difference and when they want to. And so we've seen some examples in the last week. And Jimmy Kimmel, I think it was something that was just really tangible and easy to understand for people. It just
So
came down
agree.
to,
It was such
they
a
don't.
clean concept. He said a thing, they didn't like it, they tried to kick him off the air. People were like, I don't feel good about that.
Right. And people like being able to make choices. So if someone's
Agreed.
offended by it, they want to be able to make the choice not to watch it. And if they're
I
not
think
offended
this
by
is
it,
going to encourage. See, Scott Galloway this week on Pivot talked about the consumer pocketbook becoming almost a branch of government because there will be no check on the excesses of government like consumer spending. And I thought that was so interesting and smart and actually made a lot of sense to me. Like, I think people are going to see that ABC and Disney heard the intensity of the reaction about Kimmel, and next time they'll be even more likely to use their voice. I hope.
right. I mean, he's he's talked about economic strikes and other things. I mean, I don't know if it ever reaches that level, but
No, but
Jimmy
I'm saying
Jimmy
using the power of the pocketbook to say, I'm not going to subscribe to Disney if I don't like what they're doing.
Yeah. I have a number of friends who told me they canceled Hulu and Disney Plus. I was actually kind of shocked that so many people I
I
knew
felt
canceled.
strongly, but I didn't actually cancel any of it.
Yeah. So look, it's
I
very
ended up living
difficult.
in Wilmington for 6 months last year. Like I gave it the office. You know
You
what,
got the
people? Back off.
permanent subscription plans, and
Exactly.
I need
Everybody can
my.
just.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right.
So and look, as an executive, you have to be mindful that these type of public events trickle into the workplace. And so to the extent you're thinking about rolling out some really unpopular policy and you think you can just do it because that's the environment right now, you might want to reassess that plan, because people see that this activism works and they'll try it in the
And they're
workplace
going to
too.
do it.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
So we're going to we talked about Kimmel. We're going to talk about AI because I don't think you're allowed to do a podcast and not talk about AI at this point. I think there's a tax if you don't talk about AI on your podcast every
Right,
episode.
exactly.
The
It's like the
WNBA.
podcast commissioner reaches out and says, what's going
Exactly.
on?
Is that
Right.
Tim Cook? Yeah. WNBA and the reduction of women in the workforce and
Yeah.
the shutdown. Let's talk about the shutdown. How long do you think this is going to go on, Peter? And how is this going to affect people's everyday lives?
Well, hopefully it doesn't go on for too long. but it's not really surprising that this happened given the breakdown
Yeah.
in cooperation, let's say, between the parties. And I think the Democrats viewed this as an option to maybe take back a little bit of their voice and say in how the government operates. Let's see how successful it ends up being. But government shutdowns will inevitably, over time, start affecting people. I mean, there are the first level of effects will be with government employees who are now
Mhm.
furloughed.
First, but very quickly, rural hospital, all the hospitals who get extra money under the distressed hospitals provision that got cut out of the budget from Big Beautiful Bill, like 40% of the hospitals in the country are partially funded by federal money that is getting cut off today.
Right. So there is funding for government projects, government programs, government employees. That will start impacting, you know, economic statistics stop getting collected and distributed. So there will be impacts that will trickle out, but hopefully it'll get resolved by then. And you know, I think overall, both sides will want to get this resolved. I mean, the president,
It's a
as much
very
as
weird situation, though, where the party that wants a smaller government is in power. And I feel like it's brinksmanship on their part that they wanted the Dems almost to force them to shut the government down because their choice would be to eliminate a lot of these roles. And they're going to take advantage of this moment to do so.
yeah, they might, and they've
I
certainly
mean,
made
Trump
those
has been like,
threats.
I'm going to fire people.
Yeah, and it could be true or it could be a threat, an empty threat.
Well,
We don't know.
that is
We'll
the
see.
one thing he seems to follow through on, firing hardworking government employees.
Right, and then rehiring them a few months later. I mean, some of these Doge employees, it came out in the past week that some of the Department of Labor employees who chose the fork in the road option a few months ago were just brought back. So they essentially got a several month paid vacation. Congrats, great
Nice
job.
work if you can get it.
Saved us so much money. Great
That
job, Doge.
Elon, he's a gem. Gem.
Yeah.
I
Was there some
recently
news about
put
him this week?
I recently put Twitter back on my phone, let me just say.
Hmm.
And I had not had it on my phone since election day. I was like, this will be healthier. I'm gonna take it off my phone. And I've been doing so much new stuff now that I put it back on. What a well of hate. My goodness. Like, everyone's angry.
It's
And
a
I
pretty
don't find that
toxic
to be the
place.
case on other platforms. Do you? No
It's a
one's
pretty
angry on
toxic
LinkedIn.
place. It's a
They're
pretty
always
toxic
like
place.
honored to announce things on LinkedIn.
Humbled. Humbled.
Exactly.
People are humbled. I'm humbled that I was recognized as a super lawyer, which, by the way, I paid for a month ago, but I am so humbled that they cashed my check.
And
And
here's a picture of me at the dinner that I paid for. Yeah.
here's a picture of me and the table I spent $20,000 on.
Exactly. Oh my God.
Congratulations.
Okay, so
Congratulations.
I am not the only one that finds Elon Musk revolting, it seems. What's
Right. There was a,
happening? They haven't used the word revolting, but what is
yeah,
happening with his employees this week?
right. There was a story that came out, I think, yesterday about how whole host of senior executives have been leaving Tesla and his other companies because
They don't
they're
want to be
either
hardcore.
they're working too hard or they're offended by the political views and they're hard to defend. I mean, there were some interesting stories about people having trouble going home and explaining to their kids why they work for someone who says such hateful things in public, or things that are so
Dead naming his
fundamentally
child, running around with that.
well. At a,
What was that called? The chainsaw.
yeah, the Doge
Gross.
chainsaw. I mean, at a minimum, saying things that they fundamentally disagreed with. And look, that is a danger if you're a CEO or an executive of speaking out in public, you know,
No,
and
no, it's
expressing political
dangerous to
views.
say hateful, terrible things,
Yeah, and you
as we have
risk
seen horrifically.
yeah, you risk alienating your employee base. And and so here we're seeing some pretty high profile
What
exits.
do you
Now,
think is going to end up happening? Do you think Tesla will regain its Zaza Zoo, or is it going to get folded into SpaceX and be a side note? Because I kind of think that. But what do you think?
Well, I think the way it's going, there's definitely a greater focus on SpaceX, it seems, and some other fringe projects around Tesla that are not the core business that everyone understands, the cars. In terms of long term, like just taking over space, which SpaceX and the satellite business,
Like taking over space, like the place.
yeah, the
Space.
place, yeah,
Got
yeah,
okay.
and so the satellite business, the phone, the internet business that they have attached to that, the robots. I mean, the cars. The government's actually going
The
in the other
robots? They have
direction.
robots?
Yeah, of course, they have robots. Everybody has robots.
Do you have
So,
robots?
do I have a robot? No, I used to have a Roomba, but we don't have that
Oh,
anymore.
that's creepy.
Doesn't get along with the dog. So, you know,
I would not want to be Elon Musk's robot.
it's yeah. Look, working for
That
someone
seems
like Elon Musk
unseemly.
is very tough. And if you're an executive looking to work at a company like that, you should really make sure you have a lot of severance protection, or at least as
See,
much as
I will
possible.
say there are some jobs that somebody asked me last night about a recent job I had at a company that is well known. And I was like, you know what? If you want to learn a lot and make a lot of money for a year and a half to 2 years, you should go there. You won't want to make it your life. It's not a friendly atmosphere, but you'll make a lot of money and learn a lot. So maybe that's how you want to spend a year or two. And I think we need to make that decision okay again. Like, not every moment in your life is for comfort and ease. And there have been moments in my life where I've just been like, you know what? This year, I'm going to double down, work really hard, make some money, and take time off next year, whatever it is.
Yeah. So put up with the shitty boss,
Just
and just
bad jobs that are unpleasant also have their place in our life. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a role for the remunerative and challenging job in the short term.
look. I totally agree with you, and I think it really depends on the person and how strong you are, because some of these jobs can really break people down mentally, and you have to always factor that in. It's not just about the money. But look, we know there are companies in every industry that have a reputation for being these
Mhm.
type of places. You
Yep.
could go there, you can make a ton of cash, but you're going to have the worst experience of your professional career. And can you deal with that? I've had that discussion with
Last night, someone
clients.
asked me about this job, and they were like, "How was it?" And I was like, "Learned a lot, made a lot of money, was really happy to leave." And they
Yeah.
were like, "Wow, that was honest." I was
I
like,
mean, I've had that discussion with clients. They tell me they're in the hunt for a job at a certain company, and I say, "That's a terrible place to work. Are you sure you're up for it?" And they say, "Well, what's the worst could happen? I'll get fired. I get paid out." And I'm like, "Well, there's going to be some trauma associated with that. Are you ready to deal with that?" And some
"Yeah,
people
I
are,
mean,
and some people aren't.
I think you can go into these things and say this is going to suck." The same way a would-be doctor goes into a residency and is like, "This is going to be a crap couple of years, but I'm going to learn how to do a thing I want to know how to do." I'm not saying I learned how to save lives in some of these jobs,
Yeah.
but a really hard job where I really learned something is sometimes, I don't know. Yeah, I think you
Right.
need those in your
Look,
mix of life.
depending on what you do, it may be very important for you to have on your resume the fact that you worked with Elon Musk and you're willing to put up with, whatever shenanigans comes with it.
You and I both know
And
that name brands are helpful on the resume.
of
Like, we
course,
both have Hearst on our resume, and most people that we are applying for jobs with have heard of Hearst. And that's
yeah,
helpful.
it's
It's
helpful.
like a verification stamp almost, like something I've heard of, paid you with money for a long time.
Right. When I talk to young lawyers in law school, I said, go to the best firm you can with the most name recognition, because it's going to be, they're going to have great training and their label is going to be attached to you for the rest of your career. You started at that firm, you're going to be identified with that firm. And I think it goes with any industry. If you can get to one of the top players at some point in your career, you want to do that because
Yeah.
it's important. It means something. And then you can pivot from there. And I talked to plenty of people who just go to places with that intention. We negotiate, as much protection as we can, as a pleasant exit ramp as possible. And, they get the experience and then they move on. So,
And then, yeah, makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I think that's worth recognizing. But also, if you are an ongoing asshole like Elon Musk, you will have talent attrition.
Yeah. And he must know that on some level. And I'm sure
I
he
think he
doesn't
wants
care.
it.
I don't think he cares.
I think he wants fresh horses at all times.
Right.
Like he runs
Well,
horses until they're tired and then he wants a fresh horse.
Well, we've heard him talk about a lot of things, and one thing he never talks about is the value of a certain type of employee or whatever. And I've said to several people and in several different outlets, he's known for a lot of things. Managing people and HR skills is not one of them.
No.
That's not one of his genius talents.
Nor is paying out severance he owes. So if you
Right.
are going to work for one of his companies, when you are creating your deal with your lawyer, keep in mind he is not someone who honors contracts.
Right.
How
So you
does
got to
someone
be
handle
prepared
that,
to fight
actually?
lawsuit, and you want to just make sure the
I'm
contract
going
is
in. Like, if I was a client of yours, which I am, but if I was dumb enough to be like, I want to go work for Elon Musk,
right.
what would you tell me to put in my executive contract that would protect me from his disinterest in paying people out?
Well, we'd want to make sure the language is really explicit and clear on their rights to terminate, but also your rights to terminate for good reason. So your job changes, they don't pay you, your compensation decreases, you're forced to move, um, your reporting changes, all those rights that you have to trigger a resignation and get paid out severance, and has to be very clear what you're going to be paid out, when it's going to be paid out, how it's going to be paid out. All of those things need to
Do
be
you think any of those
explicitly
people
laid
from
out.
Twitter are getting their severance money?
Yes, because the
I
strategy
have not
is,
heard of anybody that's gotten their money.
well, they're in court right now, and some of the
Yeah.
cases are settling, and the other ones, the employees are winning because they have good contract language. It's pretty explicit. Now, his strategy seems to be very consistent with what some other people I've encountered in businesses, which is, we don't care what the contract says. We're going to disregard it. We're going to make them sue us because we have more money than they do. And inevitably, they will cave and we will pay them something less than what we agreed to. That is not an honorable way to do business, but that is the way a lot of people do business,
It's fascinating and reprehensible.
unfortunately.
Let's talk about what's going on with the WNBA.
Yeah.
These
So
women are, I'm happy to see, pushing back. What's going on?
they're fighters. They're tough. And it's been a very interesting year for the WNBA. And as we talked about,
For women's sports.
for women's sports generally,
Everyone
but
watches women's sports.
exactly, very popular. Valuations are surging, attendance is surging.
Gotham Football Club, we love it.
Yes, exactly. Um, so the WNBA is approaching its championships and also is in approaching labor negotiations that have already been kicked off that are going to be very contentious. We've already talked about that a few episodes ago about how this was going to be a big story. And one of the players yesterday, Nafisha Collier, read a statement about a conversation she had with the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, several weeks ago in
She was
private.
the Deloitte lady, right?
I don't know her
And
background,
she's like,
but
sorry.
it was allegedly a private conversation, and she read it, a very eloquent statement, very detailed about all these things the commissioner said, and that were disparaging to certain players, that were not in the interests of the
Oh, I
players,
kind of missed this.
and it's caused a stir. It's caused a stir, and it's very
The
brave. And I think,
commissioner was bad mouthing other players.
yeah, she said something like
Kathy.
the topic of Caitlin Clark came up, and she said, Caitlin Clark should be thankful she has the league. Otherwise, no one would pay her $16 million, or Nike wouldn't pay her $16 million. Meanwhile, Nike paid her 20 something million dollars before she even signed with the league.
Yeah.
So thanks. Um,
The league is lucky to have Caitlyn, as far as I can tell at the moment, and Chikari and all the other stars.
yeah. So look, I mean, why do we bring this up? I mean, obviously there's a lot going on here with a labor negotiation, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the sides. But this goes back to what we discussed earlier. Employees, workers, whether they're basketball players or white collar workers, they feel power, and they
Mhm.
see right now in society the only way you get what you want is by talking out loud and standing up for yourself. And so that's going to happen in the workplace. And if you're making tough decisions regarding employees, you got to be prepared for that. You got to be prepared for the pushback. And here's
Yeah, you're
just like a
right.
very public example, but it could play out in your workplace easily.
Hmm.
Change in return to office policies, change in time off policies, PTO policies, things that touch employees' daily
Or there's a
lives.
change and people push back and the change goes away
Right.
from what we've been saying.
Right. And so we're in benefits season. We're at the end of the year. I mean, this is a time where
We're not the
employers
end of the year.
change
It's only
policies.
October.
Well,
Well,
not
we're in
in
Q3. You're right.
not in corporate planning
Q4. Sorry, we're in
circles.
Q4. How
Yeah,
about that?
corporate planning circles. All the Q4 messaging is already
Yeah,
lined up, right?
you're
So
right.
so you got to be mindful of this when we're structuring your messages, when you're working with your lawyers and your comms people. Like, you got to be ready for the pushback and how you're going to deal with that. And this is just a very open,
Interesting.
obvious example that everyone
But
sees
also,
and
if you're
learns
the
from.
CEO, you're the boss, never talk to another employee that isn't 1,000% in your circle of trust about another employee. Like what Kathy
Yeah,
Engelbert learned is,
that's terrible,
yeah,
terrible. And as we said last week, nothing's truly private anymore, and
right.
you just got to be mindful of that.
You gotta know it. Well, another thing that is apropos to one of the things that is worrying me the most, as we've talked about, I think that the world is moving towards putting women back in more traditional gender normative roles. And there has been a huge exodus, again, of women from the workforce. There has been, during the same time span, 220,000 women left the workforce and 40 some thousand men were added to the workforce. And I am all for more people getting jobs. Obviously, I'm happy about the people who were added to the workforce, but I am worried about this. Do you think that this is like a secular trend?
Well, the numbers don't lie, right?
Headwind?
And we've seen a number of stories in the past week. Women are leaving the workforce. I saw a similar story about older workers are leaving the workforce because they're
Oh,
not
really? I didn't see that.
they're not allegedly AI knowledgeable enough. And and look, we're also seeing stories about um, companies aren't hiring because of AI, right? So there's three sort of different stories we're saying that I want to put together for you and for our listeners into one
Mhm.
package, which is
Okay.
there's a lot of uncertainty going on in corporate boardrooms and decision making groups about what this administration is doing. There is
Is that
total
because they
ins-
change their mind every day about economic
right.
policy
Well,
or another reason?
there's total unpredictability about economic conditions.
Hmm.
And when the administration's economic programs are based on tariffs that can be increased or decreased by the president on any given day, you can't forecast in that environment.
Hmm.
And when DEI policies are being rolled back, who's suffering from that? As we've discussed on this program, women, my belief, and from what I've seen, women are suffering the most from that.
So I had a
And
great
this,
conversation with a friend
well,
who's a big headhunter today, and she said there are very few clients who are asking for diversity in the interview
right,
pool anymore.
right. So all these things are coming together, allegedly for different reasons, but they all point back to the same place, which is the government's policies are forcing companies to act this way. And it's not about AI. And it's not about because older workers can't use AI. It's because the government's policies are pushing companies in this direction. They can't hire, they have to lay off, they have to cut costs because there's too much uncertainty there to forecast even beyond the next 6 months. And when that happens, companies don't hire, they get rid of people. When they shut down DEI policies, when they let go of people, it
So are we going to continue
disproportionately
along
impacts
these
women.
lines
Well,
for
it's going to
now?
happen because companies are afraid of the government and they don't want to talk about the true reasons why
Okay,
they're
but
doing this.
is
So they're blaming
attrition,
AI
are
and other
women going to
things.
continue to leave the workforce, do you think?
Well, I mean, I hope not, because it's important to have diversity in the workplace and to have gender
GDP is directly
diversity and
related to
race.
how many people are working.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope that's not the result. But I think there's a time of uncertainty right now, and it's also taking longer for people to get jobs and get back into the workplace. And also, by the way, workers are being pickier about where they want to work, so it's taking more time, on both sides. But I think a lot of this is just a cover up for companies who don't want to say the government has tied our hands and we can't
Yeah.
do stuff, and it's being
Hmm.
blamed on other things, particularly
Agree.
AI. So
Agree.
there we go.
All
That's my
right.
view.
All right. What's your zero for the week? Heroes and zeros.
Well, my zero is kind of depressing, but it's a story that came out yesterday, and I don't know why it hasn't received more attention. Maybe because of the shutdown. I don't know. But the U.S. deported a plane full of Iranian asylum seekers back to Iran. Over 100 people, families, women, men, children, back to Iran. People who left the country illegally, who sought asylum here, and who are likely going to be imprisoned and killed upon their return. And apparently, there's a couple hundred more that they're going to send back. And
That's
I
terrible.
think it's a really sad moment for a
I'm
country
so
that
sorry to
that we're
hear
in.
that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So a little bit of a downer, a lot of a downer. I hope it receives more attention. It should, because it's not what we stand for, or
No,
not what I thought we stand for. Who's your
no.
zero for the week?
It's got to be Pete Hegseth. Are you kidding me? I mean, that speech
Surprise,
yesterday.
surprise. Yeah,
I
you
don't
didn't
want any
like that?
fatties. I don't want any beardies. I don't want any
Yeah,
dummies. And that's what
yeah.
we've got right now. Um, I
Well, that was an easy
also
one.
think he should watch out. I don't think Trump enjoys people taking the spotlight that like that. I think he should watch out. He
Well,
can go from prize dog to doghouse real soon.
some people thought he was like trying to stage a campaign type event for
Oh,
himself,
that
Mr.
was
Hegseth.
totally giving Vance notice, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
Wow. That's a real
Who knows?
battle of the geniuses, isn't it?
Who's your hero?
My hero is today is my birthday. And
Yes.
I will say in the modern age, it is so nice. You get so many like this is people say all the bad things about digital connectivity. All the nice messages you get on your birthday are such a lovely thing. Like you get texts, you get social media. Um, I think that is, I don't know. That's a specific and selfish, but I think
I
we
think
have
it's
to
wonderful.
appreciate the ways your phone brings people sending love and warmth to your life.
Well,
How
I
about
think birthdays are important. They should always be celebrated. And I hope you enjoy
yes?
celebrating yours.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, my hero for the week is I went to a great exhibit in New York at the Guggenheim on Monday.
Look at you.
It's a retrospective on Rashid Johnson, who's a contemporary artist who lives in New York and is a great guy.
You're so cultured.
And yeah, I'm so cultured. You should go. I mean, everybody should go. And I mean, first of all, the
I'm so
Guggenheim
impressed.
building is amazing, and the number of works that are in the exhibit and sort of the progression of the artists that you can see sort of as you wind up the
Yeah.
museum ramps is really cool. And there was some, he was there to talk about it, and
So cool.
he talked about some of the challenges of physically staging the exhibit. And so you'll see things like plants hanging from the middle of the Guggenheim, and
That's
and
cool.
and so it's cool. I think everyone should go
Oh,
see it, and
all
I'll be
right.
there for a few more months. So get
I'll
over
go
there.
see that.
Yeah.
I am
All right.
hoping to get to the Metropolitan Opera before their brief showing of the debut of an opera to the book The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Oh, wow.
Um, it's playing for a very limited time, and I'm hoping to get there.
Great.
Michael Chabon, one of my favorite books. They made an opera out of it. So that's
Special.
cool. Yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully someone gets you that as a birthday gift. But
I,
otherwise, you'll always have this podcast to remember your
I will.
birthday
And that cupcake, which was so cute.
and the cupcake.
Um, Peter, have a lovely holiday.
Yeah, you too.
Sadie,
Hope.
thank you for producing this episode as always. And more
Thanks to
soon.
everyone for watching and listening. And
Yeah.
we'll see you next week on Across the Bar.